And you can use a plumbing fitting to make this. It's a compression fitting. Now this is like a 5/8 to 1/4 inch plumbing fitting, compression. And the actual fitting is smaller than 1/4 inch. You'll have to use the drill bit to drill it out.
The camera.
So you can get this shank in you, all right?
Yeah, this is better.
But then to sharpen it to the 3 facets,
No,
the thing I read said it was supposed to be
Record.
125%
No,
of the diameter
That one
is
isn't.
the length of the facet. So on a 1/4 inch, on a 1/4 inch shaft, that's 5/16, just a fuzz over. So it's put a piece of blue tape around it, and grind every other side using the hex fitting, and you have 3 points.
Exactly what do you use it for?
You can use it to create a little groove. Okay. You can use it to make a little groove for a burn wire. You can use it to embellish or to highlight texturing. You can use it if you turn a bowl and turn a foot on it and you want to add a little feature ring in the bottom, you can use it for that. All right. So it's a multi-use little tool.
A handy little tool.
You know,
It is, yeah.
the retail price on them is $40 or $50, and I've got $18 in these two. The drill bit you can use and put blue tape on it and set the depth in a bowl. We did that in class, didn't we, Tom? All right. So that's some of my homemade tools, and there's a kit for this on the raffle table, courtesy of me. You have to furnish the wood, and you have to furnish the 5-minute epoxy, so you can make one. All right. For those of you that have never turned a bottle stopper or a utensil handle, like an ice cream scoop, that kind of thing, you do that on a mandrel. And this is a mandrel. It fits a Powermatic without the chuck. This is the appropriate Morse taper. And this is just a threaded, 1/4 inch threaded rod to keep it on there, okay? Then you have to drill your blank, and it'll be square. You thread the blank on to the mandrel, all right? Then you turn it, and you can finish it on the lathe. But the friction of turning it will stick it to the mandrel every once in a while. And you can't put a pair of pliers on it or you'll ruin your work, okay? So I devised a simple way of making a clamp to break it loose. And I cut this on a bandsaw at 110 degrees, 55 degrees on each side. You can cut them 90. 110 degrees gives you a little more bearing surface. And if it's stuck, you can clamp this on your work and give it a quick twist and then pull it loose. I glued leather in there, so it won't bar my work. You see that? You can use CA glue, or I think I used contact cement.
Tight
Bond 3. And there's one of these and some leather on. Yeah. Make your own. If you have multiple face plates, and this happens to be a one-way, I have this committed with a glue block so I can glue things to it. To get it off is a Tommy bar, and it comes with one of those little funky Tommy bars. I made my own Tommy bar handle. That's an old drill bit. It wasn't worth reusing or resharpening, so I drilled it. It's the right size for the faceplate, so you can make your own Tommy bar handles. Save your old drill bits.
question.
Okay.
How do you cut the drill bit?
I didn't.
You just drill a hole.
I drilled a hole big enough.
Glue it in there.
Oh, okay. Okay. One of them you said you start with a long drill bit.
That's the other one.
How did
I
you,
cut it in half,
how?
but I used a Dremel and just scored it.
Okay.
And since it's high-speed steel, you can snap it off in a vise,
Question, thank you.
okay? All right. But this one was,
length.
yeah, this one was the whole drill bit.
Yeah, okay.
It's that far in there.
Yeah.
And it's got 5-minute epoxy on it, and it's never coming out of there, all right? The other thing you could save is if your old cordless drill dies, you can save the chuck. And you can also put a drill bit in it for a depth, for a bowl, all right? And I inspired Pat, he had a drill that died, and he made one. So that's my 5 minutes of fame there, all right? All right. Thank you. Bruce has already beat everybody up here, so we'll start with Bruce and go down the aisle.
Well, actually, I'd like to go next so I can take pictures of everybody, since my camera.
We'll give you
filled
permission
up.
to do that.
Are you done?
He's done. I'm not done. I'm next. I'll show you.
Where's the
what's going on
record
in a minute.
button? What's
Right here,
that one? Okay. I
right
pushed-
behind the green light.
pushed it.
That'll be on the other side.
Yeah, it's blinking now.
The other side, isn't it?
Yeah, it's recording.
Last month I brought this bowl and asked for help because it had a lot of tear out in it. It doesn't have a lot of tear out anymore, thanks to Tom Dunn and his 80 grit sandpaper. It really does make a difference. Thanks to Larry Martin and his use of a water-based sanding sealer. We got it over to Larry's after I got the 80 grit on there and got it a heck of a lot better. And Larry started showing me how to use multiple coats of that sanding sealer, which dries real quickly, and we sanded it. And then when I got it home and got my new lathe, thanks to Hal and Bill,
Larry,
and who?
Larry, you put it together?
Yeah,
You, me.
Larry. God, I forgot it was Larry. See, it was often I forget you. Hal and Larry came over and helped me put my new
Nobody, you know more.
1840 jet lathes together. And now that I've got speed well over 2,000 RPMs, I was able to finish it off with high-speed sandpaper, and then refinished it, and there is no more tear out. So thank all of y'all very much. Now, with my new jet lathe, this is a piece of cherry. I had help from Hal and Bill at cutting down a cherry tree last year. And I've had bad experience with cherry splitting all to pieces when it's wet. Well, this had dried in my shop for not quite a year, so I knew it wasn't perfectly dry. So I turned it just a little thick, but I like heavy bowls, because this had all kinds of cracks in it. Used the old CA glue and everything, but none of these cracks have expanded, and I thought this was some of the prettiest cherry I've ever seen, and there's no tear out. And again, with a new lathe, with high speed and low speed, because this, listen, I would have never been able to have turned this on my old lathe that I couldn't get below 800 RPMs. This started out around 300 RPMs because the blank, the log, was so out of round. But by being able to start slow and form it up and round it up and start faster and faster and faster, I got a real decent bowl out of the deal. And then this was another, and like I said, no tear out. Here's another piece of walnut, no tear out. It had full of cracks. It was a piece that both Hal and Bill warned me that would probably fly all apart. I didn't listen, but I was very, very careful on how I turned this, and I kept filling the cracks with CA and doing something else. And I was able to finish this off at around 2,500 RPMs. And it's one of the nicest walnut pieces I've made. Okay. Now, hollow. as all of y'all know by now, I do not have the skill set that most everybody in here has, because I do not spend hours a day in the shop. I have many other passions. Wood turning is simply one of my many passions. And so I'm not really an expert at anything. But I have found a hollowing tool that I absolutely love, because I don't get any checks, I don't get any flarebacks, I don't get any rough gouges, I don't blow my bowls apart. This right here is simply a wall gauge. I take it off. I have a very long handle so I can stand at the end of my lathe. And the bowl, if it does something, it's going to do it way over there. But this works. This cutter is a high-speed steel cutter, but the bolt that goes through it's just a regular quarter-inch 20-thread bolt. You can use anything that bolt will go through. Carbide. The cutter is real easy to sharpen. Thank you, Hal, for showing me how. And it stays sharp a pretty good long while. I can hollow out 2 or 3 bowls. But you can get this sucker right in there, and as you get to the bottom, you just simply turn the cutter around to use various cutting edges on it to flatten the bottom of the bowl. But it, because of the outrigger is laying on your tool rest, it's not ever going to do that unless you move it all the way off your tool rest if you're not paying attention. But if you have or make yourself a 14-inch long tool rest, this sucker's not likely ever to fall off the end of your tool rest. So, made by a guy over in Tennessee, yay, called a Hollow King. He sells it with a handle, but why would you buy it with a handle when you can make your own handle, whatever length you want it, or without? And that's what I did. And these various sizes of these, but this one has served me very well. And then when you get close to the edge, you put this little gizmo in and set it where you do not want to blow through the edge of your bowl, and it stops you from blowing out the edge. And you can do things real thin. If you look at that walnut platter I made, it's got like 1/8 of an inch wall thickness on it. So even though I personally like to turn things with at least a 1/4 inch wall, you can turn it down to a 32nd of an inch if your wood will handle it. So I'm real happy with this piece of equipment. All right, Bruce.
You're the next victim, Bruce. Oh. For those of you that don't know Bruce, Bruce is also a mechanical engineer, and he's got a shop that makes most of us have shop envy.
If you need anything made, just give Bruce, a $500 deposit and he'll make it for you.
So,
Right, Bruce?
only 2 things make me nervous. Volunteering to speak in front of a group and being asked to speak in front of a group. So,
Do I need to hold your hand?
please. So, a couple months ago, Mike Hunter was here, and I bought a Mike Hunter tool called a Viceroy, and with the idea that someday I would make a hollowing gizmo.
Hold that up a little bit.
And he makes it with a 5/8 handle, and I turned it down so it fit my handles that I make. And so, Clark, what's the name of this?
The Bosch, Trent Bosch.
Trent Bosch. So, in some years ago, I saw a Trent Bosch of this make in a magazine, and I said, "Oh, I can make that." So, but I didn't have an idea of scale and how heavy the steel had to be and what size this thing was be. So, I went down to Hot Springs with the guys last month, the previous month, and I'm sitting there just fat, dumb, and happy, minding my own business. And the fellow sitting next to me we were chatting a little bit, and a guy walks over with one of these and hands it to him. And I just about came out of my chair. I said, that's what I've been looking for. So we took some drawings and some pictures and things like that, and I came back to the house and started building. And this is what I made. I modified it slightly, but there's no play in it. It moves around just as free as you need, but it doesn't have any real movement. So the way I made it specifically for this tool, and so that's why I sized it so it fit in here, and you just square it up. And then I have my handy-dandy handle. I have longer handles at the house, but for this so far, it only needs the short handle, because I'm not getting too crazy yet. But I have longer handles that I can play with. And so the Trent Bosch has pins that go in these different holes. Maybe we can see this if I move. Can you see? Yeah. There we go. Okay, so there's, and I've made threaded holes for these shoulder bolts that I had a box of, and decided that I didn't want the pins to accidentally come out, because I don't know about you guys, but when you start getting tired, you tend to drift and do things that you didn't intend to do. So I didn't want the pin to come out and end up in my work and shot across the place. So I decided that my design would have these threaded places. But then I immediately realized that their logic, that every time I want to move this thing, it takes a while, right? So I had a small thing of luck where I took the threaded bolts and just removed the threads, but the root of the thread is still evident, so that it just slides in the hole. Well, it turns out when you put it in there and side load it, it gets trapped. So, and that's what you use these bolts for, is to lean your tool against while you're making a cut. And this way I can move it from one to the other with the safety that I know that's not going to fly out of there if I side load it. So I used plastic shim stock to make it so that it was smooth. The bolts are a known size, and I'm just 1/1000th oversized for the holes. And it was a challenge to learn how to program my machine so that I could put these radiused ends on here. So I was more jazzed with having these radiused ends on my tool than making the tool itself. So it's, and I have a shorter tool. The other thing is I got to put in a plug for this Hunter tool. When Mike was here, he was doing a demonstration, and he took this tool. This has a very small carbide, and I immediately said I wanted the bigger carbide, which was, I didn't realize how foolish I was, because he's taking it and just jabbing it into the wood, and it'll only take a certain size bite, and it won't catch and tear things apart. So the beauty of this is it keeps me under control, so I'm taking these cuts, and it'll only allow me to take so much, right? So I'm going to do exactly the wrong thing, is I have the shorter one with the bigger carbide on it, and I'm going to extend that and fit it to this thing so that I can stand back here, jab it in there and see what happens. So that'll be one of my next projects, is making the longer tool. But this is a very nice, it's called a Viceroy, it's a very nice tool. So that's my copy.
Next.
We're going down the line.
Man, how do you follow that? Name tag's at home, since I wore it home the other day. I'm Tom Baxter. I have never turned anything before I started coming here. I bought a lathe at auction and took the woodworking class and thought, this will at least tell me, do I really want to get into this or not? Well, this is the first bowl that I turned with a lot of assistance out of Cyprus, and it didn't turn too bad. And it's, I think I'll hang with this, So if you're interested in the class, it's well worth it. Very professional, great advice and hands-on experience. So.
He lies. He's a lying.
We paid him well.
Yeah, we paid him.
I'll see you after the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
We're just going down the line. I brought a couple of different things that I worked on. I'll drag some of them over there. It'll take a while.
Go behind the lathe.
Yeah.
I'll get this.
Okay.
Pretty good, Ken.
Not bad for an old
I
guy.
was gonna say, you did pretty good.
Let me get that in here.
Oh, that's okay.
Just get this in.
People like to turn coffee scoops and things of that nature, where you're turning on 2 axes. You make a donut chuck. I like to use a block that I've threaded to fit the spindle. And your donut chuck, you turn, of course, this in this orientation first, then you mount it in there through a hole in the side, and then you hollow it. The only challenge is not making it a funnel. Knowing how far down to go, because you can't, once it's in here, you can't really measure anything. And so that's, that's always fun to do.
Well, you could pre-measure your depth there and set your gauge for that though, couldn't you?
Well, it's a round ball when you stick it in here.
That's right.
Blue piece of tape on it.
And so you just kind of say, well, I know that the bottom of this, if it fits snugly against the bottom, I know where that is. But if it doesn't fit snugly against the bottom, then
Oops.
you get to practice again. And that's made it super simple. And various sharpening apparatus. One of the, the Wolverine system. This is similar to that in that I made my base, a base that these pieces fit into. You set for a Ellsworth grind, you use this little device right here, which you roll it in, you extend it 2 inches, and it all goes up against the stop with CBN wheels. Everything's always the same. If you want a fingernail grind, you use this tool, which rotates in a different manner. It's part of a Sorby setup that I modified and stole pieces off of. And if you're for a resetting angles, always getting the same angle every time, and you make a sector, pin it, and if you're a scraper, one pass, you're done. And the angle's always the same. You want to use a conventional bowl gouge. This will keep you, a bottom feeder type. That will hold it square against there, so as you just rotate it, your grind is the same.
Clamp it on?
No, you just hold it on there.
The heel stops.
Yeah. You just hold it on there, and it's got a little lip on the back of it to hold it.
How do you get your depth?
It's however far it is to the grindstone.
Oh, there's no,
Run it through till it hits the stone of the CBN wheel.
okay.
But you just drill a hole that matches your gouges, and like I say, you square it up, and then you can run it back and use the whole face of the wheel that way.
But you've got your angle setter all.
Yeah,
right, that's the
you
secret
set
too.
your angle with the sector here.
Right.
And that way it's always repeatable, and like I say, it's in there, one twist and back to turning.
If you're gonna have those plans, sit to me so I can put them on Facebook page.
Right.
You wait on it.
Yeah, I'll be waiting.
You wait there. Yeah, just wait a while.
Using that, he'll give you that.
But that's, some of the things that I like to play with. And like I say, rather than buying a Wolverine, which that's no challenge when you can make something.
That's your,
I guess I'm next. I guess I'm the only one that was willing to bring a blooper. Now, the blooper is either an archaeological find out of one of the desert caves in Arizona, or some damn fool was walking around Lake Dupree and he found a piece of wood and he thought, that might even have some, spalding in it or something good. Well, as it turned out, That's not the way it looked. Now, I guarantee you, this is not the way it started.
Hold it. We want to get this on Facebook.
But how many here know that wood will talk to you? Anybody know that? Let me assure you without question, wood will talk to you. And that's what this one did to me.
Sometimes it yells at you.
The first thing it said was, "Don't touch me with that sharp thing." And I kept it on my lathe thinking, oh, that shouldn't be all that too much. I ain't got that much more to do. The second time it talked to me was, it said, "If you touch me with that thing one more time, I'll have your ass." Now you would think that that is the blooper of this thing, that the way it looks. That's not the blooper. The blooper is how well you can see the inside.
Try to that again, bro. Right.
That does shine up pretty good, doesn't it? That was mine, thank you.
All right. Well, you guys follow me a little bit. You know I like to do different things. This is got a lot of different aspects to it. Started off with the center, which is hickory, and it's an inside-outside turn. Anybody doesn't know what that is, I'll attempt to explain it. Don't nobody say nothing, okay?
Explain it, Larry, explain
Oh,
it.
come on, man. We ain't got all night. And, of course, the bottom is walnut and it's epoxied on. It's turned separate. This top is poured, it's epoxy with some shavings and some pearl in it. And this is, I don't know, the way I do this is I pour it, this is a dollar store bucket's what it started out with. Right there, you can see a dollar store bucket, and that's what I make my mold out of. First thing I do is I make a waste block to go in the center and leave the edge just enough for, whatever you're gonna put in it, whether it's just clear epoxy or whatever. Always put something different in it. And then I've usually got the faceplate on this end, so I come in here and I mount it here, and I hollow this end out as far as I can. And then I glue this walnut on this side, put a tenon on it, flip it around, and then hollow the other end up to halfway or so. And that's how I get this done. This that's dogwood from Michael's. That's my wife's favorite. This is a I guess you call it a remote control bulb in it. It does all kinds of colors, and it has a I even brought it with me just in case. Has a remote for it. It's really, really neat. I think some kids would really enjoy this, like in their bedroom or something. My wife keeps it in the kitchen. If I can ever get this loose here. Never was any good handling rubber things. I'm gonna plug it up over here real quick. Maybe.
It's Mr. 220.
No, you're okay.
I don't think it's gonna do that.
Oh, you have all sorts of lights, but not long.
Yeah. See, it does, you can just change all kinds of colors here. You can make it blink on and off. You can make it phase through and fade out and fade in. Sort of neat, really. Very inexpensive. I think this setup, including this, was like $15 on Amazon. And they give you 2 bulbs. But only 1 remote. Anyway, there it is, my friends. This is video number 115 on my series, in case anybody wants to look it up. See how I make it, detailed.
What's the name of your YouTube channel?
Wood Whirler. Yep.
We got a link to his YouTube channel on our website.
I just published my
There's links to several cars.
160-second video.
Way to go, Larry.
Thank you.
But we need that inside out explained.
You need that explained? Well, Joe, I'm not sure you'd understand. You couldn't even remember I was over there the other day.
Well,
My God,
Continuity.
what an impression I made.
I know, I have to stop being embarrassed over metal blocks.
But I'm gonna be over there in the morning now, don't
Please.
forget.
You gonna be next?
I don't care.
You right ahead.
Which one do you want?
Whichever one you wanna show, both or all or whatever. I'll have to carry some stuff.
I'll forget my name before tonight.
That's why you got a name tag on.
Ah, it does fit. It's for centering the rings for segmented turning.
I can be your assistant.
What's that?
I can be your assistant when need be.
Well, what you do is you take a ring, put it down, you set your base ring in a waste block, drill a little 5/8 hole in it, put it down. At home this is locked in a place, but there's centered. Put your glue on it and a weight, and you've got your ring centered. You don't have to tie up your lathe. The base unit was a Longworth chuck that I made a mistake on, so I had to use it for something else. You can also do open segmented if you get the Seg-Easy plate. That fits on there, you put your segments in, and again, just stomp it down. It's called the stopper. That's it on that. If you want to build one, it's time to I'll just borrow yours. Okay.
Me next?
Next,
This is the Longworth chuck.
That's fine.
That I made, so. Again, it just sits on the lathe. You can turn your bowl around and put it in there. These little buttons you can buy on Amazon by the pound. That also is on the directions are on YouTube. Do you want to see the sharpening jig?
Sure, show it.
oh, yeah.
This is a jig I have for sharpening the Ellsworth tool. The only thing I forgot is a tool.
Yeah, me too.
That's the setup. That's the depth if you got a long enough tool. Then it's just a matter of sharpening it.
Do that again, I missed that. I ran out of memory on my camera, and this has to work.
That's it.
All right.
I'm like Bruce, I don't like in front of the crowd, so.
Now, when we saw Ellsworth in Hot Springs a couple of years back, he didn't have that. He,
No, this is called a Geiger setup.
In Hot Springs, Ellsworth used something very similar to that one I had. The wooden one that I had on his is
Yes.
aluminum.
Yeah.
And it, you have to have your pocket set a specific distance.
yeah.
Okay.
So he didn't have that thing, just that.
Where'd you buy this?
Geiger.com.
cut.
But it was set at a specific distance out.
Oh, okay.
And that
Okay.
pin sits down in there and it goes.
And you can
through
set it for
and
other
locks
things.
in
I
place.
guess
He was just
for my,
going, throw
Ellsworth.
that pin on, throw it in there, and then he was back.
Yeah, just like like that one I had
Okay.
there. You extend it
You're
through on
next.
that
I'm
2 inches, set it in the pocket and you're done.
Okay.
Alright.
Alright, I have absolutely zero fancy tools, so I got to make my own for this bowl. I had 2 spindle gouges, so I took one and made my own bowl gouge, ground it down, made a bowl gouge for this bowl out of a spare piece of cherry. That was a fun, scary project, because it came off the lathe at me. We got that fixed. And then I really got into bottle stoppers this last week. It's been a lot of fun. I made one out of cocobolo, made one out of a bird's eye maple, made one out of a piece of zebra wood, and one out of boko. And I learned, I was watching a guy, he was complaining about his bottle stoppers. When he would unscrew the wooden top to wash the metal piece, he'd screw it back on and the metal was slowly stripping out the thread on the inside of his wood, and he'd use it once or twice, wash it once or twice. So he said, either glue the thing on or put some CA glue over the threads and let it dry. So I just glued it on the first couple times. I got this one. You'll notice there's a little bit of space between the wood and the metal piece, and that's because I put the CA glue and I didn't pay attention to the let it dry part. And I went to screw the wood on. In the middle of screwing the wood on, the wood wouldn't screw on. So that one got stuck, but that was really fun. Fun little projects, quick and easy. And they look nice, so that's all I got.
Okay, I'm John. I'm the old man of the young man, and I had no intention of ever turning anything. I just brought him down here because he wasn't old enough to drive at the time.
He was my first student.
Yeah.
Yeah, he taught me how to make.
So anyway, he had a.
Yeah, not the glue. I didn't get the glue part.
He let me turn some stuff on his little Grizzly bench top lathe. So I made some measuring spoons for my wife and some family and stuff for Christmas, and that was fun. And so then I started making pins. So I made everybody a pin for Christmas, all the kids a pin for Christmas. And then I'm married to a really good woman because it was her 40th birthday this last year, and I said, "What do you want to do?" And she said, "I want to go fly fishing." So we rented a cabin and we went fly fishing for her 40th birthday. So I just turned her this pin the other day. That's a little fly fishing kit that I got out of Penn State, so she'd remember that she went with me. So I'm just getting into it, and Ethan is going to give me bowl turning 101 next. So there you go.
Ethan, had his money bags there, you know, empty.
There's been some interest in the carbide business, and Easy Wood sells a tool and they'll convince you that you can't sharpen the carbide tip. Well, I'll show you a little secret, and I don't know that I was the one that came up with it, but I'll pass on what I found out. Trend puts out some diamond files, and they have their own fluid, which they're promoting their fluid. They'll tell you, and I don't know, but they say that this fluid is a little lighter than WD-40 or some other fluid, and it somehow the diamond chips and stuff is a little bit, there's something to it, they say, that you need to use their fluid. If you want WD-40, fine. But what I found out, and at first I took the tip off the tool. This is the rougher here, which they're both the same. The rougher or the finisher is round. But I took I first took this flat file, and I'd lay it on the flat surface, put fluid on it, and if you'll go about 5 licks, you'll have that carbide tip sharp. But the one thing that I did find out, and it's just my way of thinking, and I have no proof of any evidence of what I'm fixing to tell you, I use all 4 corners on the bit before I file it. And my reasoning on that, if I'm filing on this 3 or 4 times, I may have one edge that would be at a different profile. And I don't know that to be a fact, but it just seemed, me, I'm simple. Simple minds think simple things. I think, well, if I'm filing on one, I'm filing an edge off of one, but I'm not on the other. I would use all four corners, and then when you get done with that, then you can take it off and go to piling. To pile them on the tool, all I do is I just lay, and I like this one because I can do what I'm fixing to show you and not take it off the tool. The tool has the screw in the middle of the bit. So you got to be on the outer edge, and I do this, usually I'm right here at the lathe turning, so for speed wise, if I don't want to take it off and do that and put it back on, I just on the tool, I'll just take and hit that outer edge. And again, rotate it all the way around and use your tool before you do it. But I just hit that outer edge because eventually you'll get down on the head of that screw, and if you do that, you're going to drill the screw out. It's real simple. Just put a little fluid on the tool, about 4 or 5 licks, you're in business. And that's carbide sharpening.
Hours. When do we?
You got 3
Hours. Try not to impale you.
That's good. I'm good.
Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I've always wanted to do that and start talking right away now. No homemade stuff from me tonight. Both the jig I had underway and a tool underway. Maybe I'll complete them during my lifetime. If so, you'll see them. So I decided that I would praise the virtues of scrapers tonight. In particular, negative rake scrapers. They do have true advantages over a scraper which has a flat top on it. When I first encountered the idea of negative rake scrapers, I thought, just tilt it up. That's a negative rake. But after making a negative rake scraper and using it, there is indeed a perceptible difference in the way they work. So I dusted off some 5 decades old physics and tried to do an analysis of what was going on. And what I think is happening is that as you have the scraper level, then the spinning wood coming down exerts a pressure on a force on the edge. That's obvious enough. However, when you go into vector analysis of the forces, you find that a surface that's tilted down, there's a resultant. The force being exerted actually can be resolved into a number of different vectors. One of those is a vector that's pulling the tool into the wood. And as that happens, there's the possibility for the tool to self-feed and go out of control. Secondarily, and of a much more minor effect, is the fact that I normally sharpen these to a 30-degree angle on top, 40-degree angle on the bottom, giving me a 70-degree included angle. That's right in the middle of the range usually recommended for a scraper. The nice thing about it is that I do a 40-40 grind, the Stewart Batty grind on my gouges. So I have a platform permanently set up, a CBN wheel. I do both my scrapers and my gouges without ever having to monkey with a sharpening jig. The second thing about this is that I try to take it down so that the top grind is approximately 2/3 of the way down from the top. And there's a matter of fulcrum and lever moment there. When you're holding the thing perfectly flat, the fulcrum is closer to being in a straight line with the entirety of the tool, so there's not as much of a tendency. Again, it's minor. The third thing has to do, I think, with the edge itself. A scraper, despite its name, doesn't really scrape if it's prepared properly. You generate a burr on the edge of it when you sharpen it, and that burr is actually a cutting edge. A scraper, at least in my use of it, is a delicate finishing tool. I use it to remove any tooling marks from the inside or outside. I have several tools of this size and thickness. This is my inside of the bowl. I have a spear point, and I have one that's flat across with a slight radius at the edge for smoothing out the bottoms of platters and dishes. But I think that the intersection of two planes in a corner gives you a better burr around the perimeter of the edge as you sharpen it, with that included angle of 70 degrees rather than a single angle of 70 degrees. Just kick it out of your way. And furthermore, when you do a negative rake on the top, you do an initial burr, you get a good cut with it, but then you have the capability of taking a flat card, polishing that off, and using a carbide tool to simply put another burr on. It doesn't take an awful lot of pressure, just do it 3 or 4 times. Harder than you would if you were using this on a card scraper, for those of you who are familiar with that tool in woodworking. And then you can use that again, and it's actually a better burr and a cleaner edge that first time that you use the carbide tool.
So where do you get the little carbide tool?
This is probably from Lee Valley Veritas, but there are many of them. Any place that you can buy a card scraper will sell you a carbide tool to roll the edges of the card
Is it
scraper.
square cross section or round?
Round.
And
Although you can buy them triangular and any sorts of.
they also make carbide router bits, solid carbide router bits.
Yeah.
And you take the cutting edge, once you've screwed it up completely and poke it in a handle, and you've got a perfectly good furniture.
Indeed.
Basically, any metal that's harder than the tool.
I can find a use for those.
And the last thing about scrapers is that I've been waving this big ass thing around. I have probably 7 or 8 ground for specific purposes, all negative rake. This is one that I ground for making small boxes. The edge is about 5 or 7 degrees off, starting the grind here, and it's a 90 degrees, so this edge is dropped too. And it allows me to go gently and smoothly and get the inside of a small box. I then use this one, which is another flat one. It has an almost imperceptible radius on the edge to get a perfect flat bottom on my little boxes. And I have others to make recesses for the rare times I use a mortise instead of a tenon in turning a bowl. But if you have not experimented with negative rake scrapers, I would encourage you to at least give it a try. I think if you use scrapers at all, you'll be very pleased with the effect of a negative rake scraper. That's it.
I missed that. That's basically just a finishing cut, right?
Yes, absolutely. I don't use a scraper to do heavy cuts.
Okay.
These
I thought
are
I missed it, so
Those are finishing.
These are my finishing tools.
thank you.
Used successfully, I can get away with starting at 240 or 320 sandpaper grit. sometimes higher than that if I'm really anal about making those final, smooth
If the
passes.
stars are aligned.
Precisely.
Careful of cords.
Well, I didn't know it, but Ken and I should have teamed up, and, because you did the first half of my presentation. You had that stomper item, Seg Easy plate, the base plate and stuff like that, and I started all with that and somehow wound up with my first open segmented bowl. It was a learning experience at every step of the way, starting with the fact that it wasn't supposed to even be a walnut bowl, but I cut the base first and then was super excited to be starting this bowl, and I just kept cutting that same board until I got to the top part where it was supposed to have another walnut rim and realized the cut list said cut walnut there. I'm like, why did it change? And then I realized I screwed that up, but it worked.
You're the only one that knows
I'm the
that.
only one that knows. We said this was a safe space earlier for this story. When I took it to work today, we discussed how it was perfect and exactly as
There
I
you go.
planned. So, but it's walnut with a ash accent ring, and it was fine. I mean, it was tedious cutting the little pieces for the first time, gluing everything up, cleaning all the glue out from in between the holes, and talking yourself into jabbing this thing you've spent so much time, jabbing a tool into it. But once I got over that and stuff, it was actually pretty fine. Interesting, I thought, was you didn't have to decide how you wanted to shape the bowl, because you had already decided that back when you put the information in. I used a piece of software called Segment Pro, and you've already made that decision. So you knock off all the corners, and it's about where you wanted it, and then you just smooth it out and make it look deliberate, and you're there. And the turning was probably only about an hour's worth of time, and the finishing took longer than that, and the gluing.
What was your turning speed on that, Brian? To cut it, your turning speed when you were...
I think I started around 300, 400, 500 RPMs to knock the corners off, and as it got more smooth, I was able to increase the speed to 600, 700, 800.
So you're not turning segmented stuff at 2,000 RPMs?
No.
No, on the lathe that I have, I leave it in the low speed almost all the time. So that goes, 50 to 1,500 or so, and that, for bowl stuff, that seems to be a great range.
Okay. Yeah, he's got a great lathe too, by the way. Anybody else?
One more. This is certainly not fine wood turning. This is the first bowl I ever made by myself. And it's called Wood Turning on the Cheap. For $9, I bought a 8-foot 2x10 at Lowe's and cut it into sections and glued it up. And then I went back and looked at it a week later, and it was full of cracks. So if you could get some dry wood, it would be nice. And a friend of mine calls it my Firestone bowl. And the color is Danish oil, red mahogany. One coat of Danish oil and one coat of spray poly.
I'm just gonna talk a minute about segmenting. That's what I do mostly. I'll tell you how easy it is, because it looks difficult, but it really isn't. First thing you gotta do is have a plan to go with. Show it to the camera. And if you know how to use a computer, you can get those, and they work great. I've got one. I don't trust it. I like to make my own drawing, and then whatever your diameter is, you know what pi is, you just divide the diameter by pi and get the circumference and divide that by how many pieces you get. And then I keep a calculator in the shop, because I can't do any kind of math in my head. But anyhow, once you got that set up, you just cut your pieces. And this is a ring that's cut, hasn't been glued yet, I just got a couple rubber bands around it, holding it together. But that's pretty good right there. You could probably get away with gluing that up like that. I'll pass that around. But I won't do that. When I glue it up, I'll put a spacer in the halves and glue up 2 halves. And then, because even though I've tried to fine tune my sander, you know, as close as I can, I'll sand one ring and get it pretty, almost perfect, and the next one will be off a little bit. Maybe there's just a piece of sawdust or something in there gets in the way. Anyhow, it doesn't take much to change it. So if you do the 2 halves like this, then once they've glued up, you can take I've got a piece of plywood, sandpaper glued to it, take and run the flat sides across that, or you can do it on a disc sander or a belt sander, but that heats it up and that warps it, it changes a little bit too. So I'd rather do it on the dry sandpaper. And then glue the 2 halves up. And usually I use
Hose clamps.
hose clamps, thank you. But I seen this on YouTube. Some guy, you just got your string through that block of wood, and then you use a screwdriver or something to tighten it up, and it works pretty good. The only problem is, you got
The string around the wood. You need
Well-
a third hand.
yeah, getting your string around the wood, and then, like if you're building, you know, progressives, well then the next one has to have a longer string on it, and the next one has to have a longer string on it. But it works real good, and sometimes I run out of, you know, hose clamps anyhow.
Looks to me like it's swarm on you. It looks to me like it's swarm on you.
Well, it can't swarm on you.
Yeah.
Of course,
He's masking tape too on that.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah, that's what, I hardly ever glue mine up loose. I see a lot of guys doing that on YouTube.
I didn't see the tape.
You got all the pieces laying here, and they put glue on this one, and glue that one, and glue that one, and then that takes too long. You take it and lay it out on a flat surface like that on your masking tape, glue that all together, then come up here and drop your glue in each one of those, and I take a little spatula or something, and glue it out, and around like that.
Where do you put the spacer then?
Huh?
How'd you put the spacer in it?
This is a little double stick tape.
Oh, okay. Gotcha, I see it.
And this is, I put this on here, it's just a little, probably an 1/8 inch piece of
Wood?
ebony, yeah. But usually I use,
Why the spacer?
huh?
So he's doing halves.
I'm doing half ring, you know.
halves.
I don't want to glue a whole ring up. And if I glue it up without a spacer,
That's it.
then my gap, whatever my air might be, will show up anywhere. But if I put a spacer here and there, it takes up all the gap here. So when you figure out the angle that you're cutting, and you set your tools, your saw or whatever, as close as you can get, because nobody's perfect, you know. You're gonna have a little bit off. And I know guys that have adjusted their saws until they got it just perfect, and then they never change it, they never touch it. Well, that don't work, because
Saw gets hot or whatever. And
Yeah.
Metal
Temperature changes.
moves, yeah.
hot days, cold days, you know, things change.
Yeah.
You just saved a great deal of swearing.
Yeah,
Bad wood.
yeah. And if you got 12 or 16 pieces, and this has 32 pieces in it, it doesn't take even a hair to make a big difference when it gets all the way around. If each piece is 1/1000th off, well then, when you get all the way around, you've got a sizable gap in there. then, when you stack all your rings up like this, this is what it looks like. And then, when you put it on the lathe, and you turn it, it smooths it out. That's it.
Well, I brought Kathy as my show and tell.
Somebody's got to keep you in line.
Somebody's got to do something, yeah. So,
Go behind the lathe.
so Bill said this was about jigs, and I don't know if this counts, but I'm a nerd with a 3D printer. So this is my baby rattle jig. And I just decided what I wanted it to be, put some slots in there to mark my cutting points. I have the little center spots so that when it's in two halves, that's where I drill my holes with my Forstner bit. And when you do it right and you follow your jig, it turns out like this, which, you know, works quite well. When you don't follow it, it turns out like this. And you have little holes here where you can see the insides. I think that's what they call inside out turning. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to make an inside out one, I'll do it right. This was my first attempt, and while it's ugly as sin, I'm still proud of it. I also used that same 3D printer. She needed some looms made, and I wanted to have the uprights to have a little bit of a curve and look kind of pretty as opposed to being square. And so I made the design. I have a lip here. I can just put that on the edge of the wood, draw around it, and use a punch to punch the center for the hole, and drilled them out. And I made 6 of them in just a few days with that. So that was my jig. And everything else she's going to tell you about.
I do weaving, and when I took the class, I was able to turn a handle for my antique loom, which was really neat, and the guys helped me do that. But I really haven't done much turning since, but I want to try it some. But I told him I needed some weights for my loom, and this is what I wove. I guess I wanted you to see what this was for. But he turned these weights for me, and they hang on the back, and they weight the threads down so that the threads on the edges need a little extra weight. So that's what that's for, and so he made those for me. And then that's what I made with it.
Well, a while back, I got an interest in stabilizing punky wood. You know what punky wood is? Well, I did some checking, and a lot of the chains were $150, $200, $300. Well, that's, my budget director's not gonna let me spend that kind of money. So, we were out shopping, went to, what was it, Hancock's Furniture, or Hobby Lobby, found this is a terrarium thing. It's about a 1/4 inch, just shy of a 1/4 inch thick glass. The round shape helps when you draw the air out of the inside, and that's you get pressure from the outside. But the round shape is like an arch. It just gets tougher as the more you suck out. The little jar on the inside is just for if I'm going to do a couple of small blanks. I don't need to fill up and waste a whole bunch of stabilizing resin. Just fill up that and put it in there. That's my weight when you put that in there. And I'm going to do a demonstration, I'm thinking June, on stabilizing, the science of stabilizing. And you'll see what this is for then. But it's just a weight to hold down the planks in there, because they got a lot of air in them and they'll float. You don't want them to float. Okay. Top made, and I forget the name of this rubber, it's a gasket rubber. I'll have it when we do the demonstration, I'll have the name. Just made the top out of a piece of 1/4 inch acrylic gasket, some brass fittings, valve or two you can get in any hardware store. Put that on there. And that's just as simple as it goes. It draws enough, I mean, it's almost perfect vacuum on the inside. And more of the details in June.
Does it hold it good?
Just what
Does it hold the vacuum good?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That gasket, you don't have, I've disconnected or turned the pump off, the vacuum pump. I just use a regular AC, HAVC pump. And I just turn the valve so they're closed and it'll hold that vacuum all day long.
What PSI are you?
Well, it's not PSI, it's inches of mercury.
He's probably getting up to 29.
Almost. You can't get 29 is perfect.
Perfect vacuum.
It's like outer space type vacuum. We get about
Inches of mercury.
28.5 here in Little Rock, 'cause you're not at sea level.
I'm just trying to
Close, yeah.
calculate what the collapse factor of your glass aquarium would be, because it
Well, again, it is round.
About 90.
Yeah, it is round,
You
so
can't
as
pull
it,
vacuum
as it,
hungry enough,
as it
probably.
pressurizes,
Whack it.
it pulls on itself and draws down. Like submarines, all the pressure on the outside of the submarine. You ever wonder why a submarine's round, not square?
Never thought of that. You use cactus juice?
I use cactus juice. After many phone calls with Curtis and find out what I'm doing wrong. Because there's tricks to it. You gotta have a lot of patience. But show you all more in June.
Thank you, John. We look forward to it.
Here comes the man.
For purposes of show and tell, this is a bowl from a board. And it literally could come from one board. You can see that they're different color boards. What you do is you cut your board in half, so I've got a half of one kind of board and half of another. And set your bandsaw on a 45-degree angle and cut your rings, then glue the rings together, then stack them up. But when I stacked it up, I didn't get them quite in line. So in order to not have little gaps there, I had to keep going thinner and thinner and thinner. Bob, where's your flashlight? I think you're not going to see through the light. Anyway, feel the weight of this.
No way. Here you go.
I don't know if you can.
Stretch again, huh?
Well, I'm about to tell you what. It got a little
Yeah.
Show the camera.
Hell, I think mine was just a little bit thinner.
Maybe.
He'll try next time.
This is a shameless plea for wig stands. The demand for wig stands could almost overwhelm us. Bill didn't emphasize it enough. People, we need wig stands. So when you go out to the shop, turn a wig stand and then turn whatever you wanted to turn. Wig stands are extremely simple. It's half a bowl, and a straight shaft. This initially saw service as a cutting board. I just cut them around and glued them together. You can see how. Can you see a cutting board in there somewhere? Yeah. Now, as far as bloopers, y'all that have been to my shop have probably seen this hanging on the wall.
Salad bowls.
hold on now.
Now that is thinner.
Show the camera.
This camera.
Yeah.
There it is. Okay.
This was in my early days of turning, and I had managed to crank out a couple of bowls, and I thought I was pretty good. And I was still working at the time, so I raced home from work and slapped this one on the lathe, and oops. And then about an hour and a half later, I had two. So I found this sign at my first visit to SWAT, and I just thought, how appropriate.
Is that one more cut syndrome?
Yeah, probably two more cuts. As far as simple jigs, this is about as simple as you can get. It's about as simple as you can get. Piece of melamine, cut a 1 by 2 in half, or drill holes in it, then rip it in half, put a magnet up here, and your tools don't fall off. I don't know how I'd get by without this. I lay this beside my lathe, and every tool that I am not using is on this. And it doesn't fall on the floor, and they don't get banged up or anything. I would recommend that everybody have a deal like that. Grab a tool here. At Lowe's, you can buy a thread. Is it a threader?
Tap.
Tap.
A tap. I strongly recommend that you make you a whole mess of these. Put this on here, and you can put a big bowl up against it. You can put it against the bottom of a piece of turning. Doesn't mar it, doesn't make a hole in it or anything. All you have to do is screw it on there. It turns like that. A quick tip, don't reel it into end grain. If you tap into end grain, all you get is sawdust. Ask me how I know. But a little one like this, one that forms a cup, there's all kinds. This one also taps in there, and I just leave the rod in place because this has got a router bit, and this is what I use to turn as a tailstock to turn thin spindles.
What's the thread size on that, do you know?
3/4 10.
Quarter?
3/4 11.
3/4 10.
3/4 10.
Yeah.
Okay.
3/4 10.
Now, in order to prevent cutting through a bowl, what you need is some type of a gauge. This is a simple gauge. When this little pad is touching the headstock, this can be adjusted to 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, whatever, away from the chuck. And then if you're turning along and you're thinking you might be at the bottom, you can quickly come up and check it like that. If your bowl's a little bigger, this is a giant economy size. This also has the advantage that loosen the thumb screw, set this 1/4 of an inch away, then pull it back to as however high the bowl is, and this tells you how deep you're going to have to drill your depth hole. This distance right here. Better unscrew that. Any question?
Guess you lost your flashlight. I'll get it.
Are you the last one?
I guess, and mine's easy. It's at my level of expertise, basic.
That's okay.
All right, so they said it could be anything we like or anything that helped us in the shop. And since my expertise level is basic, we're going to this basic book. This, I actually checked this out of our library when I first started coming here, and I like this so much that John bought this for me for Christmas. And they call it 2 books in 1. And the reason for that is, on the top, it gives you projects you can work on, and then on the bottom, it has all your techniques. So while you're working on a project, if you're just learning, you can flip through and find those techniques that you need to use to work on those projects. So it's a really beneficial book. Love it. Just wanted to share it with y'all. That's it.
We ran a little bit long tonight, but did everybody like this format? For
Yes.
once a year to do something like this?
Yes.
Oh, we make it a
You can do it more than once a year.
You think so?
Oh, heck yeah.